The day my mother left my 9-year-old son crying on my porch, clutching a sealed wooden box, was the day I learned some gifts are ruthless declarations of war. How far would your own blood go to destroy your life just because you are happy beyond their control? Stay until the end to hear how I built the perfect trap to bury her manipulation forever. What sat inside that box will terrify you. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Delilah Cook. It was a late Friday afternoon in Seattle, the kind of day where the sky hung low and heavy with slate-gray clouds, and the rain fell in a continuous, relentless sheet against the glass of my home office window. I was sitting at my wooden desk, wrapping up a final email for the week, surrounded by the comforting scent of a burning vanilla candle and the rhythmic, warm hum of the space heater at my feet. I had fought hard to build this quiet, peaceful sanctuary, far away from the chaotic demands of my past. But that fragile peace shattered the exact moment I heard it. A frantic, desperate pounding echoed through the long hallway. It was not the polite, measured knock of a delivery driver. It was the rapid, frantic hammering of someone trapped in sheer panic. I shoved my office chair back, the legs scraping harshly against the hardwood floorboards, and sprinted toward the foyer. My heart hammered wildly against my ribs. When I yanked the heavy front door open, the frigid, damp air rushed in, carrying the harsh smell of exhaust fumes and wet asphalt. But the physical chill was absolutely nothing compared to the absolute ice that flooded my veins. Standing on the wet porch was my 9-year-old son, Mason. He was completely drenched, his small shoulders heaving violently as jagged sobs tore from his throat. His knuckles were bone white as he fiercely clutched a heavy, polished oak box to his chest, as if his life depended on holding it. I dropped to my knees instantly on the hard wood. Beyond his trembling, fragile frame, the bright red taillights of a sleek black Lincoln Continental were bleeding into the thick, foggy distance. The massive tires screeched as the heavy car tore down our quiet residential street, speeding away without a single moment of hesitation. I knew that vehicle intimately. It was my mother Clara's car. She did not even bother to roll down the window or look back to see if her own grandson was safe. I grabbed Mason by the thick fabric of his winter coat, pulling his freezing body into the warmth of the house, and slammed the heavy door shut against the howling wind. Pure panic gripped my throat as my shaking hands frantically patted down his arms, his legs, his pale face, desperately searching for any sign of blood or physical injury. He was physically whole, but his spirit was completely shattered. His eyes were wide with a primal, suffocating terror that no innocent child should ever be forced to experience. "Mason, honey, look at me," I pleaded, my voice cracking as I cupped his wet, freezing cheeks. "What happened? Are you hurt?" He gasped for air, his small chest rising and falling in erratic, jerky motions. He gripped the rigid wooden box so tightly, I genuinely thought his small, delicate fingers might snap under the pressure. Hot tears streamed down his flushed red face as he finally managed to push the horrifying words out through his uncontrollable hiccups. "Grandma said Dad's company is going bankrupt, and our family will be thrown out on the street tonight if you do not open this gift box right now." I forced my raging volcanic fury down, burying it deep inside my chest so I could be the steady mother Mason desperately needed in that dark moment. I gently pried the heavy oak box from his rigid, clawed grip, setting it aside on the floor as if it were a highly radioactive explosive. I carried him upstairs, stripped off his damp, heavy clothes, and wrapped him in his thickest, warmest fleece blankets. I held him close to my chest, rocking him back and forth, whispering soft, rhythmic assurances over and over. I told him his father was a brilliant man, that our home was completely safe, and that Grandma had just made a very foolish, terrible mistake. It took over 1 full hour of gentle coaxing, but total exhaustion eventually pulled him into a restless, heavy sleep. Once I was absolutely certain he was completely under, I crept out of his bedroom and rushed downstairs. My hands shook violently as I grabbed my phone and dialed the number for my husband, Vance. Vance was the founder and chief executive officer of Novacor Logistics, a brilliant green technology startup that was rapidly rising in the logistics industry. He was the solid anchor of our family, the exact opposite of the toxic manipulation I had grown up drowning in. When he answered, I explained everything in breathless, frantic sentences. I told him about Mason, the devastating tears, the cruel lie, and the ominous wooden box currently waiting in our foyer. I am on my way, was all Vance said before the line went dead. 45 agonizing minutes later, the front door clicked open. Vance stepped inside, his jaw set tightly, his dark eyes swirling with a heavy mixture of deep concern and simmering anger. We did not exchange a single word as we walked over to the kitchen island, where I had carefully moved the heavy oak box. The wood was cold and smooth, smelling faintly of expensive wax and something distinctly metallic and sterile. Vance stepped in front of me, shielding my body slightly with his own as he reached out and unlatched the heavy brass clasp. The metallic click echoed through the silent kitchen like a gunshot. We did not know what to expect. A part of my frantic, racing mind truly feared something explosive, something physically dangerous. But Clara was far more insidious and calculated than that. Vance slowly pushed the heavy wooden lid open. Inside, nestled perfectly in custom-molded, thick black velvet, was a breathtakingly detailed, highly realistic miniature diorama. My breath caught sharply in my throat. It was an exact, flawless scale model of the central warehousing facility for Novacor Logistics. Every single detail was terrifyingly perfect, from the tiny solar panels on the roof to the painted yellow lines on the loading bays. But the truly horrifying part was the meticulous recreation of total destruction. The warehouse model was entirely engulfed in fake, highly realistic plastic flames. Plumes of dark synthetic smoke billowed from shattered miniature windows. It was a perfect, terrifying portrait of my husband's entire life's work burning right to the ground. Sitting coldly in the dead center of the simulated fiery wreckage were two items, a sleek silver USB drive and an outdated, chunky black flip phone. It was not a physical weapon intended to draw blood. It was a meticulously crafted psychological execution, and the war had just begun. Staring down at the meticulously crafted inferno, the metallic scent of the diorama seemed to morph into the expensive, suffocating lavender perfume my mother always wore. Clara was celebrated across the upper echelons of Seattle as a saint wrapped in designer silk. To the public eye, she was a legendary philanthropist, a woman who smiled graciously for the flashing cameras while handing out massive, oversized checks to local orphanages, battered women's shelters, and modern art museums. But behind the closed, heavy oak doors of our sprawling childhood estate, her philanthropy was nothing more than a highly effective weapon of mass control. Every single dollar she ever gave away came with invisible, razor-sharp strings attached. She did not raise a daughter in that house. She curated an asset. Growing up, my entire existence was violently micromanaged to feed her flawless public narrative. Who I befriended in middle school, what color dress I wore to my high school graduation, the exact degree of my smile at her endless charity galas. Everything was deeply calculated to reflect her manufactured glory. Any deviation from her strict script was met with weeks of freezing silence and severe psychological warfare. When I met Vance during my senior year of college, I introduced an uncontrollable, rogue variable into her perfectly sterile equation. Clara despised him from the very first moment he stepped his worn leather boots into her pristine, marble-floored foyer. Vance did not come from old money, and he possessed zero interest in acquiring the polished, hollow charm of the elite. He grew up in a harsh, working-class neighborhood, raised by a single father who fixed heavy diesel engines for a living. Vance had thick calluses on his hands, grease permanently embedded under his fingernails, and a spine forged of absolute steel. When he first conceptualized and launched his green logistics startup, Clara immediately swooped in, offering to fully fund his entire operation. It was her standard operating procedure. She bought loyalty to secure total dominance, when Vance politely but firmly declined her millions of dollars, choosing instead to work 18-hour days, taking out massive personal loans, and building his dream entirely from the ground up. Clara did not see a hard-working, honorable man. She saw a massive, unforgivable insult to our family pedigree. He had publicly stripped her of her power, proving to the world that a man with blue-collar roots could achieve immense greatness without ever kissing her diamond-clad rings. For 9 long years, we maintained a tense, freezing cold war. We kept our distance, limiting our interactions to strictly mandated holidays. But precisely 7 days ago, that silent war went utterly nuclear. Vance and his brilliant engineering team at Novacor had spent the last 14 months developing a revolutionary, artificially intelligent routing algorithm designed to minimize carbon emissions. They used that exact technology to aggressively bid on a colossal state transportation contract. It was a massive, landscape-shifting deal, worth tens of millions of dollars in continuous revenue over the next 5 years. Against all established odds and political favoritism, the state awarded the exclusive contract to Novacor. They had rightfully beaten out a massive, firmly entrenched logistics firm that had monopolized the sector for 2 decades. But what the general public did not know, and what Vance and I had only recently pieced together through hushed industry whispers and late-night research, was the dark truth behind that defeated corporation. The losing firm was actually a highly sophisticated shell company, covertly controlled by Clara's closest associates. She was actively funneling her supposed charity funds through their bloated, fraudulent invoices, washing millions of dirty dollars right under the noses of the oblivious state auditors. By winning that public contract on pure, undeniable merit, Vance had inadvertently severed my mother's most lucrative, illegal financial lifeline. In Clara's twisted, narcissistic mind, this was not just a simple business loss. This was an act of profound, unforgivable treason. She could not simply accept defeat and move on. She needed to utterly annihilate Vance, rip his life's work to shreds, and violently pull me back under her suffocating control. Her grand design was chillingly obvious and brutally effective. She wanted to force me into a highly publicized, incredibly messy divorce. Then, she would swoop in from the heavens, play the tragic but heroic grandmother, and drag Mason back into her sprawling, soulless mansion. It would be the ultimate public relations victory. She would expertly rebrand herself as the perfect, forgiving matriarch rescuing her foolish, rebellious daughter and helpless grandson from the catastrophic ruins of a disastrous marriage to a lower-class fraud. Vance did not hesitate for a single second. His handsome face was a rigid mask of cold, calculating concentration as he reached his large hand right into the plastic flames of the diorama and extracted the sleek silver thumb drive. We knew better than to plug an unknown device into our primary home network. We walked silently upstairs to the spare guest bedroom, where Vance kept an old, heavy laptop completely disconnected from our wireless internet router. He slid the metal drive into the side port. The cracked screen flickered to life, casting a pale, ghostly blue light across his hardened, unshaven features. The root folder contained dozens of highly complex, incredibly detailed financial spreadsheets, encrypted email logs, and international bank transfer records. My stomach plummeted straight to the floorboards as I scrolled through the endless rows of data. It was an absolute masterpiece of corporate forgery. The documents painted a clear, mathematically sound, but entirely fabricated picture of Vance, systematically embezzling massive sums of state money directly into untraceable offshore accounts located in the Cayman Islands. The routing numbers, the forged digital signatures mimicking his exact handwriting, the fake communication logs with shady offshore brokers, everything looked terrifyingly authentic. A seasoned team of federal forensic accountants would spend 5 to 10 years just trying to untangle the intricate, brilliant web of lies Clara had bought and paid for. At the very bottom of the directory, Standing apart from the complex spreadsheets sat a single, plain text file. Vance clicked it open. There was no motherly greeting, no fake warmth, just a cold, clinical execution order typed in plain black letters on a white background. Sign the divorce papers by Sunday evening. Bring Mason to my house immediately. If you choose to disobey, every single piece of this evidence will be sitting on the desk of the Federal Bureau of Investigation at exactly 8 o'clock Monday morning. We were still staring in paralyzed silence at the glowing white screen of the disconnected laptop when a harsh, shrill sound shattered the quiet of the house. It was not a modern digital ringtone. It was a crude, piercing electronic trill. It was coming from downstairs. We sprinted out of the guest room and rushed down the wooden staircase, our socks sliding on the slick floorboards. The noise was originating from the exact center of the kitchen island. The chunky black flip phone, sitting innocently beside the ruined miniature warehouse, was vibrating violently against the granite countertop. I grabbed the device. The tiny liquid crystal display showed unknown number in blocky green text. I flipped it open and pressed it to my ear. "Hello," I whispered. "I assume you have reviewed the materials, Delilah," Clara said. Her voice was not angry. It was terrifyingly calm, devoid of a single ounce of maternal warmth. It sounded like a corporate liquidator assessing a bankrupt warehouse. "You have exactly 48 hours," she continued smoothly. "I expect you to pack your belongings, take Mason, and leave that pathetic fraud of a husband by Sunday evening. If you try to warn him, or if you attempt to contact the authorities, I will initiate the federal drop. I will ensure he serves 20 years in a maximum security penitentiary, and you will be investigated as his primary accomplice. Do you understand me?" As she spoke, my eyes darted over the intricate plastic wreckage of the diorama. Under the bright fluorescent kitchen lights, something deeply disturbing caught my attention. Tucked deep inside a plume of dark synthetic smoke, a tiny, almost imperceptible red light blinked. Once, twice, accompanied by a faint, rhythmic electronic click that was barely audible beneath my mother's voice. My blood ran entirely cold. It was a live transmitting microbug. Clara was not just delivering a threat. She was actively listening to the fallout. She wanted raw, unfiltered audio evidence of a catastrophic marital breakdown, a chaotic screaming match to present to a ruthless family court judge to prove our home was an unstable, toxic environment for Mason. My immediate instinct was to scream into the receiver, to smash the diorama into 1,000 pieces, but a sudden, icy clarity washed over my panicked brain. I looked up at Vance. He was reaching for the phone, his face twisted in absolute fury. I violently swatted his hand away. I pressed my index finger hard against my lips, my eyes wide with a frantic warning. I grabbed a nearby grocery receipt and a black marker, quickly scribbling in massive, jagged letters, "She is listening, audio bug in the toy." Vance froze. His eyes shifted to the blinking red dot. The anger in his posture instantly transformed into sharp, focused comprehension. I took a deep, shuddering breath, filling my lungs, and completely abandoned myself to the performance of a lifetime. "Mom, please," I sobbed into the phone, injecting absolute terror and heartbreak into my vocal cords. "Please do not do this. I did not know, I swear to you, I did not know he was stealing. He told me the business was legitimate." Vance caught my rhythm instantly. He slammed his heavy fist onto the granite countertop, creating a massive, echoing boom. "Delilah, who are you talking to? Give me that phone right now," he roared, his voice dripping with perfectly manufactured desperation. "Stay away from me, Vance," I shrieked, backing away and intentionally knocking a ceramic coffee mug onto the floor. It shattered into a dozen pieces, the crash adding perfect chaotic texture to the live feed. "My mother sent me the files. I saw the offshore accounts. You lied to me. You put our son in danger." "It is a setup. You have to listen to me," Vance bellowed, kicking a wooden stool hard across the kitchen tiles. "I am taking Mason, and I am sleeping in the guest bedroom. Do not even think about coming near us." I screamed directly into the flip phone's microphone. I hit the red end call button and aggressively slammed the heavy pantry door shut to simulate my angry departure. We stood entirely still in the kitchen, breathing heavily in the silent aftermath of our theatrical war. Vance gave me a slow, grim nod. The trap had been successfully swallowed. We waited until exactly 2 o'clock in the morning. The entire house was completely silent, wrapped in pitch darkness. I left the master bedroom and silently crept down the hall to the guest room where Vance was waiting. He had his secure encrypted tablet glowing faintly on the mattress. We could not risk using our home internet network. Vance had already established a secure, encrypted virtual private network connection to a man named Marcus. Marcus and Vance went back to their rough childhood days in the exact same neighborhood. While Vance built physical logistics networks, Marcus tore down digital ones. He was a brilliant, reclusive cybersecurity architect who owed Vance his life after a deeply messy situation 10 years ago. I am looking at the macro photographs you sent of the transmitter board. Vance, Marcus said, his voice a low, gravelly hum through the encrypted audio channel. This is high-end, military-grade hardware. It is continuously beaming an encrypted audio stream via a cellular data network. But the arrogant fool who set it up did not route it through a secondary proxy. It is screaming its destination internet protocol address loud and clear. Can you trace it, Marcus? Vance asked quietly. Give me 30 minutes. Do not make a single sound near that toy. We sat in agonizing silence for what felt like an eternity. The digital clock on the bedside table slowly ticked to 3:15 in the morning. Finally, the tablet screen flashed. Marcus initiated a secure screen share. You are not going to believe what I just walked into, Marcus whispered, his tone vibrating with pure shock. I traced the receiver signal. It led straight to a private server rack located inside your mother's primary charity headquarters. The security was incredibly tight, but they left a back-end diagnostic port wide open. I slipped right in. A massive, complex spreadsheet materialized on our screen, highlighting thousands of red and black numerical columns. What are we looking at? Marcus, I asked, my eyes straining in the dark. You are looking at a sinking ship, Delilah, Marcus replied. This is a shadow ledger. Your mother is not just a manipulative control freak. She is a catastrophic financial criminal. Over the last 4 years, she has quietly hemorrhaged over $40 million from her own philanthropic trust funds. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. $40 million. How is that even possible? Bad investments, massive, reckless bets on unregulated private equity funds that went completely belly up, Marcus explained rapidly. She has been cooking the public books to hide the massive bleeding. But here's the critical part. A massive state audit is scheduled for her foundation in exactly 3 weeks. If the auditors see these real numbers, she is going to federal prison for the rest of her natural life. Vance leaned closer to the screen, his sharp eyes connecting the invisible dots. The state transportation contract, the one my company just won. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. The logistics firm you beat out last week, I just cross-referenced their corporate ownership structure. They are a ghost entity owned entirely by a holding company registered to your mother's private estate manager. She desperately needed that massive state contract. She planned to use her fake logistics company to overbill the state government by tens of millions of dollars, effectively using taxpayer money to quietly refill her stolen charity coffers before the auditors arrived next month. The absolute magnitude of her true motivation hit me like a runaway freight train. This was never just about punishing Vance for his working-class roots. This was never just about her twisted desire to force me into a divorce and reclaim custody of Mason. Those were merely secondary, vindictive bonuses. By building a superior, honest company and winning that contract fair and square, Vance had not just bruised Clara's massive ego, he had unwittingly ripped away her only available life raft. She was drowning, cornered, and utterly desperate. Framing Vance for embezzlement was her brutal, panicked strategy to force him to relinquish the contract back to the state, paving the way for her shell company to slide back into place and save her from a devastating federal indictment. Clara was not a powerful, untouchable goddess looking down from her high society throne. She was a desperate, bleeding animal backed into a dark corner, willing to absolutely destroy her own daughter and traumatize her grandson to save her own skin. I have downloaded every single byte of this shadow ledger. Vance, Marcus said. I have the routing numbers, the forged invoices, the direct emails between her and the shell company executives. It is a solid, undeniable mountain of digital evidence. What do you want me to do with it? I looked at my husband. The fear and panic that had gripped my throat earlier that afternoon completely evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp, and terrifyingly focused wrath. Do not touch a thing, Marcus, I said softly, my voice completely steady. Just keep the secure backup safe. We are going to let her believe she has won. My first instinct the next morning was to drive straight to the federal building downtown and slam Marcus's hard drive onto the nearest agent's desk. But the cold, harsh light of dawn brought a chilling realization. My mother practically owned half of the judges and politicians in Seattle. A quiet investigation would be immediately stalled by her army of highly paid corporate attorneys. She would twist the narrative, utilizing her vast public relations machine to paint me as a mentally unstable, vindictive daughter suffering from a nervous breakdown. The evidence might mysteriously vanish from an evidence locker, and we would be left completely exposed. I could not simply fight her in the shadows. I had to drag her entirely into the blinding, unforgiving light. She worshipped her public image above all else. Therefore, her destruction had to be a spectacular public execution. I walked downstairs to the kitchen, picked up the chunky black flip phone, and dialed her direct number. When she answered, I purposefully let my breath hitch, forcing my voice to tremble with the exact pitch of a thoroughly broken woman. "Mom," I whimpered, making sure to sound completely exhausted. "You win. I cannot fight you anymore. I cannot let Vance ruin my son's life." A thick, deeply satisfied sigh echoed through the earpiece. I knew you would finally see reason. Delilah, it is the only logical choice to protect our family legacy. I have packed my bags, I lied smoothly, staring dead ahead at the pristine granite countertop. I am leaving him, but I do not want to do this quietly. I want to make a clean break. I will come to your annual charity gala tomorrow night. I will stand beside you on the stage, and I will let everyone know that I'm coming home to the family trust. She practically purred with delight. The Saturday night charity gala was the absolute crown jewel of her social calendar. A massive, highly publicized event attended by the wealthiest elite and the most powerful political figures in the Pacific Northwest. Having her prodigal daughter return to the fold on her biggest night, publicly admitting defeat, was an irresistible feast for her colossal ego. "That is incredibly brave of you, my darling," she cooed, the fake sweetness dripping like poison. "Wear the black silk dress I bought you for your birthday. We will make the announcement right before the main auction. I will see you tomorrow evening." I ended the call and tossed the plastic device directly into the trash can. The performance was over. The trap was set. While Clara spent the next 24 hours frantically redecorating her guest wing and alerting her favorite society photographers to capture our grand reunion, Vance and I went to war. We did not sleep. We spent every single hour meticulously packaging the colossal mountain of financial evidence Marcus had secured. We did not send it to a local news station, as they relied heavily on Clara's advertising dollars. Instead, we securely routed the entire encrypted package to a fiercely independent, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist based in Washington, District of Columbia. This was a man who had built his entire career destroying corrupt politicians and untouchable billionaires. We gave him exclusive rights to the story, with one single, non-negotiable condition. He was to publish the full, unredacted exposé precisely at 9 o'clock on Saturday night. But destroying her empire was only half of the equation. I had to ensure she could never, ever touch my child again. I contacted the most ruthless, aggressive family law attorney in the city. By Friday afternoon, we had drafted and executed an ironclad, irrevocable legal trust, and a preemptive guardianship framework. It completely stripped Clara of any potential grand parental rights, barring her from ever seeking custody or visitation under any future circumstances. Regardless of what happened to Vance or me, I built a towering, impenetrable legal fortress around my son. As Saturday evening finally approached, a profound, eerie calm settled over our house. I walked into Mason's brightly lit bedroom. He was sitting quietly on his rug, playing with his building blocks, though the shadow of yesterday's terror still lingered faintly in his dark eyes. I sat down beside him, crossing my legs, and pulled him into a warm, tight hug. "Listen to me very carefully, my sweet boy," I said softly, looking directly into his face. "Grandma made a very silly, very terrible mistake yesterday. She was completely wrong. Dad's company is doing absolutely wonderfully, and nobody is ever going to take our house away. We are perfectly safe. Do you understand?" I watched the heavy, suffocating anxiety physically melt off his small shoulders. A bright, genuine smile finally broke through his worry. "Really, Dad's company is not burning down." "Not even a little bit," I assured him, kissing his forehead. "In fact, Dad is building something amazing. Now, Dad and I have to go out for a little while tonight to fix a few things. Sarah is going to stay here with you, and you guys can order as much pizza as you want." Sarah, our fiercely loyal, tough-as-nails nanny, was already downstairs, fully briefed on the situation and instructed not to open the door for anyone under any circumstances. Knowing my son was entirely safe, secure, and smiling, the last remaining anchor holding me back completely snapped. I walked into my bedroom, pulled the elegant black silk dress from the closet, and prepared to attend a funeral. The grand ballroom of the premier downtown Seattle hotel was a masterclass in aggressive, suffocating opulence. The heavy crystal chandeliers hanging from the 40-foot ceilings cast a harsh, glittering light over a sea of custom-tailored tuxedos and violently expensive designer gowns. The air inside the cavernous space was thick and heavy, completely saturated with the competing scents of roasted beef tenderloin, spilling vintage champagne, and the overwhelming, almost sickening fragrance of thousands of imported white orchids. It was a perfectly curated ecosystem of profound hypocrisy. I stepped through the massive brass-handled double doors precisely at 8 o'clock in the evening, moving with the measured, predatory grace of a woman who had absolutely nothing left to lose. I wore the floor-length black silk dress my mother had specifically demanded, but I did not adopt the weak persona she expected to accompany it. I was not the shattered, weeping daughter dragging herself back to the golden cage. My spine was forged steel. My chin was held high. My face was a completely unreadable mask of cold, terrifying composure. Clara was holding court near a massive swan ice sculpture, flanked by the city mayor and a remarkably corrupt state senator. She was draped in a blinding emerald green evening gown, dripping with borrowed diamonds, laughing loudly at a joke I was entirely certain lacked any actual humor. The moment her sharp eyes locked onto my black dress, a deeply smug, triumphant smile slashed across her perfectly lifted face. She saw my arrival as her ultimate coronation. She quickly excused herself from her circle of sycophants and glided across the plush velvet carpet toward me, opening her arms wide for the flashing cameras of the local society photographers she had explicitly tipped off. She pulled me into a suffocating embrace, pressing her cold, heavily powdered cheek against mine. "You look utterly exhausted. My poor darling," she murmured softly into my ear, her tone dripping with fake sympathy, while her manicured fingernails dug painfully into my forearm like bird talons. "But do not worry. Mother is going to fix absolutely everything. Just follow my lead and look appropriately devastated." Before I could utter a single syllable, she hooked her arm aggressively through mine and began parading me through the densely packed ballroom. She was an absolute master of the silent narrative. She introduced me to powerful hedge fund managers, elite real estate developers, and key political donors, subtly lowering her voice and adopting a tragic, mournful expression each time she presented me. She did not explicitly state that my marriage had violently imploded, but she expertly laid the foundation, planting the heavy seeds of my fabricated victimhood in the minds of Seattle's wealthiest elite. I allowed her to drag me along, offering nothing but brief, hollow nods to the whispering crowd. I let her build the pedestal as high as she possibly could. The ensuing fall would be that much more catastrophic. At exactly 8:45, the grand orchestra abruptly ceased playing. The heavy house lights dimmed to a dramatic, low purple hue. A sharp spotlight snapped on, illuminating the raised stage at the front of the enormous room. Behind the sleek acrylic podium stretched a massive 30-foot digital projection screen, currently displaying a slow, highly edited video montage of Clara handing out oversized charitable checks to smiling, underprivileged children. It was utterly nauseating. "Come with me," Clara ordered under her breath, pulling me up the short flight of carpeted stairs. We stood together in the blinding glare of the main spotlight. The entire ballroom fell into a hushed, reverent silence. Hundreds of faces stared up at us, their eyes gleaming with hungry anticipation for the impending social drama. Clara stepped up to the microphone, tapping the crystal head twice. The sharp thumps echoed loudly across the silent space. "Distinguished guests, generous friends, and esteemed colleagues," Clara began, her voice a perfectly modulated instrument of fake warmth and manufactured grace. "Tonight is fundamentally about family. It is about protecting the vulnerable, and sometimes, the most vulnerable people in the world are the ones standing right beside us." She paused, placing a highly theatrical hand over her heart and casting a sorrowful, pitying glance in my direction. The crowd let out a collective, soft gasp. "My brilliant, beautiful daughter, Delilah, has recently suffered a devastating, unimaginable personal tragedy, a severe betrayal of the sacred marital bond. She has bravely chosen tonight to step out of the darkness, to leave a deeply broken home, and return to the loving, protective embrace of her true family." She raised her hand to gesture toward the massive screen behind us, undoubtedly expecting a slide showing our old family portraits. But Marcus was already inside the digital system. The saccharine video of the smiling orphans violently froze. A harsh, deafening burst of digital static ripped through the towering concert speakers, causing several guests in the front row to physically jump back and cover their ears in sheer shock. The massive screen flashed a brilliant, blinding white, entirely washing out the expensive stage lights. Then, the true image materialized. It was not a loving family portrait. It was a massive, high-definition, crystal-clear photograph of the scorched miniature Novacore logistics warehouse. The incredibly realistic fake plastic flames and the tiny, deliberate piles of synthetic ash loomed 30 feet tall over the horrified crowd. Before the confused murmurs could even fully form in the audience, the audio track began playing. It was not the crisp, balanced sound of a professional microphone. It was the raw, tinny, unmistakably cold recording pulled directly from the hidden microbug and the flip phone. "I assume you have reviewed the materials, Delilah." Clara's voice boomed through the massive ballroom speakers. The recorded sound was stripped entirely of its public warmth, exposing the calculating, reptilian core beneath. "You have exactly 48 hours. I expect you to pack your belongings, take Mason, and leave that pathetic fraud of a husband by Sunday evening." The entire ballroom instantly descended into absolute, paralyzed shock. The polite clinking of crystal glasses stopped completely. The breathing of 500 people seemed to halt in complete unison. On the stage, Clara's meticulously constructed facade violently shattered. Her eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. The color drained from her face so rapidly she looked like a wax corpse. "If you try to warn him, or if you attempt to contact the authorities, I will initiate the federal drop." The monstrous voice continued echoing relentlessly off the high ceilings. "I will ensure he serves 20 years in a maximum security penitentiary, and you will be investigated as his primary accomplice. Do you understand me?" "Turn it off!" Clara shrieked, her voice cracking into a raw, ugly screech that no one in this prestigious room had ever heard her produce. She abandoned the acrylic podium, waving her arms frantically at the sound mixing booth located at the back of the hall. "Cut the power, cut the main feed, right now." The lead audio engineer was frantically mashing buttons on his sprawling soundboard, his face completely pale with panic, but Marcus had locked him completely out of the local network. The volume actually increased, amplifying Clara's brutal threats until they vibrated heavily in the wooden floorboards. The respectful, admiring gazes of the city's elite rapidly morphed into expressions of deep disgust, profound confusion, and sheer horror. The state senator physically took 2 large steps away from the stage. The society photographers, sensing a story 1,000,000 times more lucrative than a simple family reunion, frantically raised their heavy cameras. The blinding white flashes began going off like strobe lights in a dark nightclub. Clara was hyperventilating, her emerald gown suddenly looking like a ridiculous, oversized costume. She lunged desperately toward the microphone stand, intending to yank the thick black cables directly out of the floor. I moved significantly faster. I stepped forward and firmly intercepted her, my hand wrapping tightly around the cold metal shaft of the microphone. I forcefully pulled it away from her, trembling. Desperate grasp. I stood dead center on the stage, dwarfed by the massive image of the burning warehouse and the fading echoes of her own extortion. The massive crowd was completely silent now, watching me with bated breath. I did not raise my voice. I did not shed a single, manufactured tear. I looked directly into Clara's wide, panicked eyes, leaning into the microphone so my next words would carry across the entire room with absolute, devastating clarity. "Mother," I said smoothly, my voice echoing with total, unshakable authority, "you always taught me from a very young age that family love is absolutely priceless. Thank you for showing me here tonight exactly what your price is." As my words echoed into total silence, the massive digital projection screen behind us flickered one final time. The horrifying image of the burning warehouse vanished entirely. In its place, towering 30 feet high, were the undeniable, irrefutable bank statements Marcus had extracted from her private secure server. Row after row of fraudulent transfers, fake invoices, and offshore routing numbers illuminated the dark room. The stolen $40 million was displayed in a bright, glowing red font for every single politician, donor, and journalist to see. At that exact moment, just as the digital clock on the sound mixing board struck 9 o'clock in the evening, the heavy brass double doors at the back of the grand ballroom burst completely open. A dozen men and women dressed in sharp tactical windbreakers stormed into the suffocatingly opulent room. The bold yellow letters spelling out Federal Bureau of Investigation gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, accompanied by several uniformed officers from the State Economic Crimes Division. The murmuring crowd parted like the Red Sea, gasping in shock and frantically pulling their expensive silk gowns out of the way. The lead federal agent marched directly up the center aisle, his eyes locked entirely on the stage. "Clara!" his voice boomed, completely devoid of the usual sycophantic respect she was accustomed to hearing. "You are under arrest for massive financial fraud, grand larceny, and felony extortion. Put your hands behind your back." The grand illusion shattered into 1,000,000 irreparable pieces. Clara recoiled, as if she had been physically struck by lightning. The perfectly curated, graceful philanthropist vanished instantly, replaced by a snarling, cornered predator. She lunged forward, her manicured fingers curling into sharp claws, and pointed directly at my face. "You did this!" she screamed, her voice tearing through the cavernous hall in a desperate, ugly screech. "You ungrateful, treacherous little brat, I gave you absolutely everything. I built this entire empire for you, and you stabbed me in the back for a greasy mechanic. You are completely insane. Arrest her. She fabricated all of this." She frantically tried to play the ultimate victim, falling heavily to her knees in her expensive emerald gown, sobbing wildly and begging the stunned crowd for help, but the audience remained frozen in sheer disgust. The undeniable proof was still glowing brightly right above her head. and her own chilling voice threatening to destroy an innocent man was still ringing clearly in their ears. The very surveillance tools she had weaponized to crush my family had ultimately woven her own inescapable trap. 2 federal agents flanked her, grabbing her flailing arms and forcefully twisting them behind her back. The sharp, heavy click of cold steel handcuffs snapping tightly around her wrists was the absolute most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my entire life. I did not stay to watch them read her rights. I turned my back on the stage, the flashing cameras, and the frantic, screaming woman who had spent my entire existence trying to hollow me out. I walked slowly and deliberately down the center aisle. The wealthiest elite of Seattle stepped out of my way, their eyes lowered in a complex mixture of fear and awe, with every single step I took toward the exit. The invisible, suffocating chains that had bound my chest for over 30 years snapped one by one. I pushed through the heavy double doors and stepped out into the crisp, freezing night air. A profound, overwhelming wave of pure relief washed over my entire body. I was finally, completely free. Exactly 1 month later, the thick gray clouds over Seattle finally broke apart, making way for a brilliant, warm afternoon sun. Vance, Mason, and I stood side by side on a massive, freshly manicured green lawn. Behind us towered the gleaming glass and steel structure of the brand-new corporate headquarters for NovaCore Logistics. Once the state government realized the competing firm was nothing more than a massive criminal shell operation, they completely finalized Vance's lucrative contract, without Clara's dark money poisoning the well. His green technology startup was not just surviving, it was thriving beyond our wildest dreams. I looked down at the bright green grass. Mason was chasing a stray yellow butterfly, his joyous, unburdened laughter ringing through the clear air. His bright eyes held absolutely no trace of the terror he had experienced on our wet porch just 4 weeks ago. Watching his pure, unfiltered happiness, I realized the most profound truth of my entire journey. Society constantly demands that we endure endless psychological torture in the sacred name of blood. But the greatest, most vital lesson I could ever impart to my son was not the hollow virtue of enduring abuse to protect the concept of family. It was the fierce, unapologetic courage to strike a match and burn down any toxic relationship that threatens your peace, even if that relationship is with the very person who gave you life. We do not owe our abusers our sanity just because we share a bloodline. There are absolutely no more terrifying wooden boxes waiting on our porch. There are no more lies, no more manipulations, and no more shadows. There is only the bright, open sky and the beautiful, untouchable freedom we fought so fiercely to build. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Helena Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.